going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from hook'emheadlines.com. Busy filming week for myself, but we are coming back at y'all today with another recruiting video. The main topic of this video is, what Texas has coming in this weekend. I mentioned in the video I did yesterday, supposed to be posted earlier this morning. The Clark commitment kind of interrupted that. But, we got, I think right now the list is at 20 official visitors. I mentioned this earlier this week, did a piece on it. I'm sure if you follow Texas recruiting, you know this. One of the highlighting visitors that was set for this weekend, 5-star Temple Lake Belton wide receiver Micah Hudson. He canceled his visit. It wouldn't surprise me to see a commitment out of him to Texas Tech at any point here in the coming days. So you take him off. We had some midweek visitors that were planned, 4-star linebackers. I believe it was Kamar Mathuti and Ty Anthony Smith. My understanding with Mathuti was that they just didn't want to get him in on a midweek visit if, they're knowing that, Ty Anthony Smith is already a USC lean and that they just kind of need to reevaluate linebacker recruiting. I think that's where that stands. Texas did add Nate Kibble. He's a high 3-star interior offensive lineman to the official visitor list this weekend. He was originally planning to be a little bit more patient, but if you remember last cycle when Texas added, God knows what was it, 5 offensive line commits in a weekend in June, you're starting to get that feeling a little bit. I don't think it's going to be 5, but I could easily see Texas adding maybe 2 offensive line commits by early July. So Nate Kibble, guy that's added to the official visitor list this weekend that has Texas high on his list. We'll get into him a little bit later, though. This is the big official visit weekend, though. There were some, really important recruits last weekend. Obviously, we pulled 2 commitments out of that during the weekend, and then 1 earlier today in Christian Clark. I don't know how many commitments are going to be coming from the group of official visitors this weekend. I'd say maybe 1 or 2, but a lot of these guys have decision dates for early to mid-July, or just decision timelines that will wrap up before their senior season. So in the next 2 months, we'll be getting a lot of decisions. This class will really start filling up. Just taking a high-level look this weekend at the official visitor list. Shane, I'm going to mention each name that we have. We'll give a brief snippet, but at a high level for you, what are you looking for out of this weekend?
Yeah, so 2 overarching points that I wanted to hit on. First, I think we didn't hear any negative talk out of last weekend, which, Texas had some.
I'll say outside of Micah Hudson.
Yeah, outside of Micah Hudson, fair. But in terms of the people that were on campus last weekend, Texas kind of muffed on the David Hicks visit in the fall last year, and we've seen some hiccups. So I think that's strong news. It seemed like everything was set up perfectly, and whether these kids are going to end up coming to the 40 acres or not, it seemed like it was smooth. It was a smooth ride from everything that I've read and heard. Also, I think it's big that the quarterback of the class is going to be here. Trey Owens has been very vocal on Twitter, on social media, reaching out to other players, and him being on campus, I think, is just going to help the staff. He's going to be just kind of like another recruiter to have. And also, despite his ranking as a 3-star player, the quarterback is kind of, always going to be the central part of a class. So I think having Owens on campus and, hopefully growing some connections with these guys is going to be a big deal. But so as for the recruits that are going to be on campus this weekend and the bigger names, I think Colin Simmons, by far one of, if not the most important name, top 10 consensus edge from Duncanville. Just kind of based on the positional need, he can come in, be a game changer day one. I think Texas is already in a really strong spot for him, and a strong official visit here could kind of put him over the edge. I know he's got a couple more lined up. I believe he's in Eugene right now, but it seems like Texas is in a great spot, and a strong visit, could push them over the top. And he's someone that can start to build out this class. If you get a signature from Simmons, I think a lot of dominoes are going to start to fall. And then one guy who I do think you could, I keep saying signature, but we kind of all know what we mean here. But one guy I do think could pull the trigger, and I'd be surprised if you didn't talk about him in your other videos, Kobe Black, the Connolly defensive back. It's been leaning Texas for a long way, everything that I've seen and heard, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'll default to you here because you have more intel. I wouldn't be surprised if you end the weekend, and I don't know Black's timeline, but I think he could end up in the burnt orange sooner rather than later.
Yeah, he's one of the hot topics for this weekend. It's easy to see some reports or some message boards out there that are starting to get a little putting the card out a little far in front of the horse in terms of projecting a commitment from him. I think it's possible this weekend, but it seems like some are like one step away from saying it's a certainty if Texas has a successful official visit with him. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that Texas would really have to knock it out of the park for one. And for two, I think there would have to be momentum from some other either silent commits or actual commits in the defensive backfield. Possible. I think ultimately for Texas, I actually do have him on commitment watch. I had mentioned, though, that he was one that I was looking on commitment watch maybe out until the end of July. I'm just trying to put a halt on some of the hype. But, again, I got him on commitment watch. He's incredibly important to this class. Terry Joseph has a great relationship. Joseph is one of the ace recruiters on this staff. I think, this is a huge weekend for Terry Joseph, obviously. If he can get a commitment from a guy like Kobe Black, more power to him. I don't know if that'll necessarily happen this weekend, but I think Texas can set itself up for a summer, to move his timeline up to the summer.
Yeah. I mean, from what I'm seeing, for the top 13 rated defensive backs in the class or cornerbacks in the class are going to be on campus. And then you mentioned it earlier about the offensive line kind of week that the Longhorns had a year ago. I think you could potentially see something similar in the defensive back room even if it's some silent commits. But these guys have a good weekend and they're like, hey, let's go play 3 to 4 years together and let's do it in Austin. I think that's a very real possibility. It's going to be who is that first guy to make the move, and that's why I do think Kobe Black is so important because he is the highest rated player of the 5.
He's still the top priority at cornerback. And so no matter what, he'll have a spot in this class. It's an interesting point you bring up because, Terry Bussey right now is an A&M lean. I think that Texas can win that recruitment. I just don't know how much they're going to be able to work him into this class. It's going to be hard to sell him on the spot he'll have in the future of this defensive backfield. He's ultra versatile, and so he fits the mold of what Blake Gideon and Terry Joseph won in the secondary. But I think I had 5 or 6 defensive backs on commitment watch just on the video I did last night.
Yeah,
so,
I believe it.
And that's excluding Santana Wilson. So keep that in mind. Texas has always added a portal guy too in the secondary each offseason. So, just everyone keep that in mind. It's hard to tell exactly how this DB class is going to shake out. Outside of Kobe Black, because I know that he's a Texas lean. He has a spot above all else. He's probably the biggest certainty of the group. Jordan Johnson-Rubell, I think, is an interesting one too. But you know what? We'll go dive deeper name by name later. So, taking more of a high level approach to this again. So you mentioned Colin Simmons. Yeah, he's the highlight of the weekend. Be interesting to see if he gets the Arch Manning treatment or if to some degree he will. I think even when Micah Hudson was on the official visit list, that Colin Simmons was still the most important recruit. I think he is the must-get recruit of the cycle. So obviously he's most important guy this weekend. You mentioned Kobe Black. Do you think he's also one of the, I'm asking who do you think are the 3 most important?
I think Simmons far and away won just because of the positional need. And we've mentioned how many, defensive backs are on the board. I think Dominick McKinley, the defensive lineman from Louisiana, sneaky important, especially with the move to the SEC coming. He's a borderline 5-star type player. And if Texas were to be able to go into the boot and pull a kid like that, he's the number 1 player in the state, that would be very impressive. And then it's between Jerrick Gibson and Kobe Black for that third spot for me. I probably would say Kobe Black, just how important it is to have, a lockdown corner. And Texas does have a lot of talent in the running back room. So I'd go Simmons 1, McKinley 2, and Black 3. But I think the fact that we can debate this just shows how many high-level names are going to be on campus this weekend.
Agreed. I'm going to go with the same top two as you. I think Kobe Black is really important in this class. Yes, Selman Bridges, Jerrick Gibson, Dominick McKinley, Terry Bussey, Mack are all important guys that are officially visiting this weekend, a lot of which could end up in this class. Daniel Calhoun, for me, is the one that I'm going to peg at number 3, because I think him and Brandon Baker can be the two guys in this offensive line class out of state that could really set this class apart, really make it closer to what we had with the 2022 class with like Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell, Neto, Malik Ogbo, Cole Hudson, all those guys. Brandon Baker's a 5-star guy. Daniel Calhoun, depending on who you look at, is, pretty much a high 4-star everywhere. But he's gargantuan. He's like 6'7", 360. And Texas is in a really good spot for him right now. Granted, he's still got like Georgia, Alabama, I believe Tennessee's in the running for him. Like a lot of big schools from the SEC. But Texas can make a move there this weekend. Kyle Flood is really doing some nice things behind the scenes with offensive line recruiting right now. And I think Calhoun, for me, is an important one.
I actually love that take because of the depth and the talent, or the lack thereof of depth and talent we have at the tackle position this cycle compared to previous cycles. If you're able to get one or two of Daniel Calhoun and Brandon Baker, you are absolutely cooking, because it's going thin compared to previous years with the 2024 offensive tackles. And yeah, that's a great point. Putting yourself in a strong position with Calhoun, especially with, Georgia, he's a hometown kid from Marietta. That would be a great pull. I actually really like that pick there.
I don't think he grew up a Georgia fan from what I've seen, so okay. That helps.
That does help.
Maybe not a Georgia fan by family, like just indoctrinated. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're right. That does help when it's a kid so close to Athens that, you don't have that Georgia bloodline. Yeah. So let's go ahead and take a look here. We can keep the Colin Simmons and Terry Bussey, Kobe Black talk at a high level because we've touched on them already. Colin Simmons is the highest rated visitor, 5-star edge rusher out of Duncanville. Briefly, you mentioned he's had a multitude of visits here lately. His summer visit schedule is jam-packed. I think I don't know if it's an unofficial or official to Oregon. I think it's unofficial. And, he's taken a multitude of other visits. The two to watch at this point of his recruitment. The Miami official visit last weekend made some noise. I don't think that's ultimately going to play a big role in his recruitment. I think that noise will die down a little bit here in the coming weeks. LSU is in mid-November. There's a long time to wait in this recruitment. If you take that official visit date to LSU for anything, just know that, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns. And then obviously the official visit to Texas this weekend. Texas has to, I've mentioned this here and there during different videos and articles I've done on the site. Texas has to continue to lay the groundwork for a successful recruitment in the fall. This weekend is not about getting a commitment out of Colin Simmons. I just don't think that's possible. This weekend's about continuing to set yourself apart and keep yourself in that top 2, if not taking the lead in a sustainable way, continuing to build the relationship, continuing to convince him that this place is, continuing to convince him that I would say that this is the right scheme for him, that this is the right place for him to succeed. Get him connected to the right guys on campus, that are some of the rising studs on this defense. Really show him that, you can make a huge difference for us up front. I digress. Do you have anything else to add on Simmons?
I think you made a great point about staying in it, and we've seen how good of a closer Sark is. So keeping that, front foot forward, and Sark's going to recruit through the whistle no matter what happens. And
right.
So yeah, I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah. Moving on to Terry Bussey. Yeah, he unfortunately had, I think it was a lower body injury in track and field this spring that I think kind of set back his recruitment a little bit. But he's still a huge target for, the A&M's, Texas, and OU's of the world. He took an official visit to OU last weekend. They made some noise there. I think right now it's Texas A&M in the lead. OU might be number 2, but it's kind of close between Texas and OU right now. So for Bussey, again, it's not about getting a commitment. It's about convincing him that not only does he have a spot, obviously, in this class if he wants in, but that there's a multitude of different ways that Texas can use him and ultimately succeed. Because again, this defensive backfield is going to start getting crowded. I think it was nice though that Texas was able to free up that spot, that athlete spot in this class, with officially kind of parting ways with Hunter Motton today.
Yeah, I think just quickly on Bussey, Deshaun Jameson type role. I mean, we saw it was not really clear what Jameson was going to be on the offensive or defensive side of the ball for the first year, and kind of found his home on the defensive side of the ball. But I think from what I've heard, Texas recruiting him on the defensive side of the ball. Do you think that hurts the Longhorns because they're not, being open with him, saying, well, we'll see when you get to campus? Or you think that's a plus because they're like, all right, we have a plan for you and this is what it is?
I'll be honest. I think Texas is going to keep this recruitment pretty fluid.
Okay.
I'll say this. It wouldn't surprise me if Texas starts recruiting, if they're not already, recruiting him as a true athlete, that if they need to, they'll recruit him as a wide receiver, especially with the whole Mike Godson thing. I think there's a reason, too, why Bussey's coming in this weekend. You see the movement with Modden. Aaron Hampton's now being recruited as a true athlete. I think a guy like Bussey is going to be prioritized if they want to recruit him as a wide receiver. And I think that pitch is already there as a possibility if it hasn't already been made. Kobe Black. We talked about him a good bit. I don't have much to add on him. Do you? Okay.
No. Yeah, I think we covered it.
Dominick McKinley, 5-star defensive lineman out of Acadia High School in Lafayette, Louisiana. Pretty heavy, not super heavy LSU lean, but an LSU lean nonetheless. I'm impressed that Texas is in this recruitment right now just for the pure reason that LSU's been in it for a while. Again, it's a 5-star defensive lineman out of Louisiana. LSU has some momentum on the recruiting trail right now, too. A&M and OU are still involved here. A&M had a pretty good visit with him a couple of weeks ago. But for Texas, I don't think you're going to – I could see a world where Bo Davis does have a really successful visit here and that Texas solidifies itself in the top 2. I think that would be a realistic goal for the weekend on this visit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like I mentioned earlier, just being in it with a guy from Louisiana that LSU has also been strong with to a lot to this staff and Bo Davis specifically.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen Bo Davis land a 5-star defensive lineman yet, so I still have that skepticism. But
it's fair. A&M's taking them all.
Yeah. I'm going to package all the rest of the blue chip defensive backs together into kind of one spiel here. The highest rated that I haven't covered yet is 4-star Temple Lake Belton cornerback Selman Bridges. He's been a Texas lean for a little while. Arkansas had a pretty good visit with him. I think that was last weekend, though. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, if, I don't think Selman Bridges is going to Texas Tech. I'm not saying that. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens now that Micah Hudson's likely destined for Tech. Because Texas was obviously looking to get both them in this class. Bridges, tall, corners, 6'4", about 170. If he wants in, again, he'll have a spot in this class, but it's starting to get crowded. I think it'll be interesting to see how Texas plays this moving forward. Next up is 4-star Lancaster defensive back, Corian Gipson. It is his birthday weekend. He was widely seen as a Clemson lean here a few weeks ago. Had his Clemson official visit around 2 weeks ago. But he remains uncommitted. There's a lot of smoke right now with him in Texas. I don't doubt. There's just something in the back of my mind that says if there's a commitment by Sunday, it's going to be Corian. Another important cornerback target, Wardell Mack, 4-star out of John Ehret High School or Ehret, I don't know, I always pronounce that wrong, in Marrero, Louisiana. He is still pretty heavily attached to LSU, but Texas has a shot with him. He's another top 100 guy, and Texas is prioritizing him right now. If Texas gets up to like 3 or 4 corners in this class, he might be one of them. Really talented guy, could play at either corner spot for Texas. Got a little bit of versatility too, where I wouldn't be surprised if he could play nickel as well. This is a big official visit for sure. Biggest visit he's had to Texas so far. And then the last of the blue chip defensive backs that I'm mentioning here, 4-star IMG Academy product and Fort Worth, Texas native Jordan Johnson-Rubell. I've been covering Johnson-Rubell pretty closely for about 8 or 12 months now. Gotten familiar with his recruitment, his game. I think he's too closely tied to Texas for them to say that he doesn't have a spot. He's pretty versatile too, to where I could see him playing either safety spot or at nickel. Ultimately, I think nickel is where they're pitching him right now, but we'll see. He's got some versatility to him. He's the lowest rated of the blue chip defensive backs officially visiting this weekend. I don't know how much that matters, though. Anyway, that's my spiel on those 4. Do you have anything to add for them?
Yeah, I would just say Selman Bridges, most intriguing and probably my favorite, just because he's kind of one of those new age corners. You mentioned like pushing up on 6'4", long, lanky, and I think he's been playing against Mike Hudson for however many years. That helps. So Bridges is a guy who I think could push up to a strong senior season potentially. Creeping up to that 5-star lane, probably wouldn't get there, but super high 4-star. And yeah, just his build is really intriguing for me, and he seems to pinpoint the ball in the air pretty well. I'm interested to see how he ended up being a defensive back and not a receiver, but those are kind of the defensive backs you want. So I think Bridges is the most intriguing of those names for me.
It's fair. He's the highest rated by most of the recruiting services. Let's keep it on the defensive side of the ball here. Most of the rest of the visitors this weekend are edge guys or defensive. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think all the rest are edge guys or defensive linemen. I'm just going to go through the list here. And we talked about McKinley. Next highest rated is 4-star edge rusher Zena Umeozulu out of Allen High School in Allen, Texas. Man, that recruitment's getting a little interesting. Umeozulu was a Texas lean for the longest time. Obviously, his brother's on campus. OU made a really big impression. I think that was last weekend on his official visit. Texas has some high priorities right now at the edge position. Danny Okoye, Jordan Ross, Colin Simmons being the hottest names right now. I think this weekend will be very telling of where Texas is prioritizing Zena right now. 4-star defensive lineman TJ Lindsey, next guy up on the list. He is one of 4 IMG Academy official visitors this weekend. Coming in as an A&M lean, Arkansas is involved there. Texas is starting to heat up with a little bit of smoke in this recruitment, though. He's a 3-tech guy. About 6'3", I think he's like 290 pounds, something like that. I'll be interested to see. Texas has a lot of that sort of mold right now. There's 6'3", 6'4" guys that are getting, within like 20, 25 pounds of 300, of crossing the 300 mark. Lindsey's one of those, but we had like 2 or 3 of those visiting last weekend, like Melvin Hills, Deontay Robinson is well north of 300, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Another one of these guys is Terrence Hibbler, 4-star Mississippi State commit, about 6'2", 290 pounds. Bo Davis has really liked him for a while. I'll be interested to see just how firm he is to Mississippi State, if he's still taking visits after committing to them on June 1st. I'll be honest, one of my favorite defensive linemen or edge guys that's visiting this weekend is Alex January, 4-star guy, just big human, 6'5", 6'4", about, it's like 325 pounds out of Duncanville High School, on the same defensive line as Colin Simmons. He's solid. Texas has been in on him for a while. I know LSU's been trying to make a push there. It wouldn't surprise me if Texas has him in this class by like the end of July. I think I mentioned him as one of the guys. Yeah, he was one of the guys I had on commitment watch for the next month or so. And then last one of the group on the defensive side of the ball is 3-star IMG Academy defensive lineman Jaden Jackson. I don't know where exactly he falls on the priority board because, again, he's a guy that about 6'2", 290, 295, another three-tech guy. Texas might just be evaluating him right now. I think that's kind of the stage it's at. And, they're just bringing so many IMG Academy visitors this weekend that I think it made sense to bring him in as well. Ohio State likes him. I think some of the Florida schools like Miami, Florida State are right there as well. Some SEC interest. I think this weekend we'll get a good feel of where Texas is prioritizing him. Do you have any commentary kind of on the remaining edge rushers, defensive linemen?
No, I mean, I think it's smart to bring in kind of as many as possible on the D line. We've seen Sark, since he took over the job, prioritize that position. I mean, both lines. And I think there are a lot of interesting names. You mentioned Jaden Jackson at the end. I feel like from, what I've seen from him, he has some room to grow into a guy who, bumps up to a potential 4-star type player. It seems like he is like a body remold away from being like a truly kind of elite 3-tech type guy. And I think it always helps, whether this is naive or not, to see what other schools are really pushing. And you mentioned Ohio State. They seem to be really in on him, and they've done, a damn good job on the defensive line over the tenure of Ryan Day and Urban Meyer. So I think that's kind of a telltale sign when Ohio State's kind of pushing for a guy that's, not seen as a top 200 player. I think that there's kind of something sweet in there. So I think he's an interesting name to watch. But I think bringing in that many defensive linemen is a good sign overall as a whole for the class.
You mentioned Ohio State. I think it matters how much they end up pushing for him. Because, I think they have a big lead right now if they do really put their foot on the gas there.
Yeah.
Rest of the summer with him. Let's look at the rest of the kind of skill guys in the one commit that we have coming in this weekend on offense. Jerrick Gibson, we talked about him a little bit. I'll sum this up. I don't know if he's, I have him on commitment watch right now. I don't know if Texas will get a commitment out of him this weekend. It might be like Christian Clark, where you have to wait a week, maybe it's a month. But I think Texas is in a really good spot. Miami was kind of the school that was looked at as someone that could chip away here. They took a 4-star running back commit earlier this week. That's kind of their primary guy in the 2024 class. I think that's pretty telling. I'll leave it at that. The only wide receiver that's officially visiting this weekend at this point after Hudson canceled is Parker Livingstone, 4-star, about 6'4", 175, 180 pound boundary receiver out of Lucas Lovejoy High School, kind of around the Metroplex. He's, I think he's a guy that is a pretty solid take right now. He's got I believe his commitment date is July 1st. It's early July, and Texas has a resounding lead here. I don't think they're going to move up the decision timeline necessarily, but I think you're going to hear a lot that oh yeah, Texas is the slam dunk school for his commitment. Then the last one, you mentioned it, Trey Owens. He's the quarterback in this class. You mentioned it's good to get him on campus, kind of a guy that's your rallying point, bring some positive vibes. He's been, I think in terms of quantity of tweets, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback commit more active on social media recruiting for Texas. Man, he's all over my timeline.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a good thing. I think, like I said, I think it's good to get him in on this weekend.
We mentioned DeBose obviously at the beginning, and if, July 1st, Livingstone does commit, looking at it, it's all right, these are two wide receivers ranked out of the top 30 at their position. I do think they're both still very good takes. I wouldn't take a whole lot of stock in their current rankings on a national scale. I think the staff wants these guys, and like you mentioned, they prioritized them. And if those are your two receivers, and you maybe add one more, I don't think that's a bad class at all, despite what's happened with Micah Hudson.
I'm not super worried about wide receiver recruiting. I hope Ryan Wingo is the other guy.
Yeah.
In this class.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that'd be nice.
I think we do need an immediate impact guy, but there's a lot of time to let the continued recruitment of Micah Hudson go on, and portal recruiting as well. Not to mention if Texas ends up going after other guys, late risers in this class, we still got 6 months before
Yeah.
early signing day. So, you're right, though. We're going to have 3 wide receiver spots in this class. 2 occupied by DeBose and Livingston is probably not where I would have thought wide receiver recruiting would be at if you asked me 2 months ago for like late June. But let's put a bow on this. All right, so we got a few offensive linemen coming to campus this weekend. The highest rated of the bunch, I mentioned him earlier, so I'm not going to spend too much time on him, but it's 4-star interior offensive. Well, he can play multiple spots along the offensive line. It's Daniel Calhoun, towering offensive lineman out of Roswell, like kind of Roswell area, Georgia. Mostly has SEC schools in his top group right now. Texas is really the only one that's at least currently outside of the SEC. Georgia, I think, is the presumed leader here, but Alabama's made a big push. Auburn, Tennessee are all involved. Obviously there's a lot of schools that would love to have one of the top rated offensive linemen in this class committed to them. And, I specifically pinpointed Daniel Calhoun as one of the most important visitors this weekend for a reason. And that's because I think he's a guy that year 2 may be on campus. Year 2 for him on campus is going to be after Kelvin Banks presumably heads to the draft. And so, Christian Jones is done after his 19th year on campus this fall. And so you're going to have spots for him to make an impact. You mentioned, there's some high upside guys in this that signed with Texas in the 2023 class at offensive line. So, but Calhoun's going to be the most talented of the bunch if he ends up at Texas. Daniel Cruz, one of my favorites, man. He's awesome. He's the best center recruit that we've had in a while. 4-star guy out of North Richland Hills in the Metroplex, about 6'3", 295, 300 pounds. Really good run blocker. Kyle Flood has loved this guy forever. He's been on commitment watch for me all month long. It would not surprise me if he ends up in this class maybe at some point next week. This weekend, I don't know. I haven't heard too much that he'll announce this weekend, but it's, Texas has a huge lead here over OU. And, barring some unforeseeable late change, I don't think that's going to change. And then the remainder of the group, you've got, I mentioned this name earlier, 3-star Tascasita, interior offensive lineman Nate Kibble. He's a guy that's been on Texas's radar for a while. I think they offered more than a year ago. Big body, about 6'4", 6'3", 320 pounds, in that range. Again, moved up his official visit dates because Texas is starting to have some movement with offensive line recruiting in the 2024 class. He's someone to watch because I think Texas could take the firm lead there. I think he is a take in this class over a guy like maybe you guys heard this name last weekend, Eugene Brooks, 3-star interior offensive lineman. Has a lot of West Coast interest, but, he was a guy that I think isn't necessarily a take over Kibble. I digress there. Another take in this class is 3-star Arlington Martin, interior offensive lineman Kai Sina. He's still got some room to grow. I think he could be like a Trevor Gooseby of sorts, where he just puts on a lot of muscle mass and weight in his last year in high school. Sina is definitely a take in this class. Texas has a big lead there. Again, I think this is one that could be wrapped up by the end of summer. So I think that's it for the offensive linemen. You got anything to add there?
Yeah, I just trust Kyle Flood's evaluations. So, yeah, if they're a take for this staff, I'm feeling pretty good. And getting those names sooner rather than later, so you're not scrambling at the end, I think is a good sign. So, hopefully in the next couple of weeks you get a couple of those names committed and start building out that offensive line class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think offensive line recruiting in this class could end up being a lot better than was originally expected. So props to Kyle Flood there if that ends up coming to fruition. I think we've covered all bases, literally have covered all bases because we talked about everyone officially visiting this weekend. Do you have anything else to add?
No, yeah, I think it's just another important weekend for the Longhorns, and hopefully all we hear is good things. And from what happened last weekend, in terms of just logistics, I think we're trending towards another good weekend. Yeah,
absolutely. And, we'll keep you covered at the site. There's going to be a probably 2 or 3 articles that I link in the description. Again, I'll link the 2 videos that we did, or that I think that I did earlier this week. I think we did one last week. But yeah. Anyway, for Shane Black, Andrew Miller, Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.
Welcome.